At 62, I've learned that silence isn't always peace. Sometimes it's just the sound of your boundaries being walked over. Again. But this story isn't about me. It's about Lena Brooks, a 33-year-old woman living in Boise, Idaho. A woman who, for 5 long years, skipped vacations, worked double shifts at the local medical clinic, and lived on instant noodles to save for one thing: her own apartment. A small, sunlit two-bedroom on the top floor of a modest brick building. 875 square feet of freedom, of finally having something that couldn't be touched by anyone else's whims. Or so she thought. That illusion shattered on a Sunday evening, over roast chicken and polite small talk. Her father, retired firefighter, firm handshake, always the loudest voice at the table, set down his fork and said it like it was nothing. "Your sister will move into your place for a while. She just needs to get back on her feet." Her mother chimed in without missing a beat. "It's only for a few months. Family helps family." Lena smiled tightly. She had heard that line too many times in her life, and it always seemed to mean one thing: she gives, others take. She looked at her sister Carly, who sat across the table, nodding as if the matter was already settled. Carly, the artist. Carly, the dreamer. Carly, who had crashed on couches more often than she'd paid rent. And now Carly, who had somehow been assigned a space Lena had bought with her own name on the deed. Inside Lena, something shifted. An ache deep in the chest. The kind you feel when people you love mistake your silence for consent. Have you ever given so much that your family stopped seeing it as a gift and started seeing it as a given? And when the people closest to you begin dividing up your life without asking, how do you find the courage to say, "Enough"? Lena didn't argue that night. She didn't raise her voice or slam her glass down. Instead, she nodded slowly, just enough to pass for agreement. But inside, a quiet fire had been lit, a kind she hadn't felt in years. She drove home with the windows up, the radio off, and her mind racing. Boise's early autumn air was crisp, but her skin burned with frustration. Her parents hadn't asked. They'd announced. As if her sacrifices had turned into some kind of family asset to be shared and distributed at will. The apartment was dark when she walked in. She dropped her purse on the entryway table and stood there for a long moment, eyes drifting over the space she had so carefully built. A bookshelf she'd assembled herself stood against the wall, filled with secondhand paperbacks and medical journals. Her favorite plant, the stubborn pothos that had survived 2 winters, trailed gently over the edge of its ceramic pot. The soft, worn throw blanket on the couch. The framed photo of her and her late grandmother by the window. This wasn't just a place. It was proof. Proof that she had clawed her way out of financial instability, out of being the afterthought of the family. Proof that she could build something that lasted. And now, they were telling her it wasn't really hers to keep. As she stood in the quiet stillness of her living room, the familiar ache in her stomach returned. It wasn't about Carly needing a place to stay. It was about the fact that no one had asked Lena how she felt about it. That seemed to be the pattern, didn't it? Ever since she was a child. The dependable one. The responsible one. The one who wouldn't say no. When she was 16, she'd come home from school to find out she'd been volunteered to babysit her cousins for the summer, without being consulted. When she got into nursing school on a scholarship, her parents praised Carly's art show instead. When Lena turned 30, no one remembered. When Carly turned 30, they threw a catered brunch. All of it had chipped away at something in her, piece by piece. And now, this, the apartment, was the final straw. She wasn't angry, not exactly. What she felt was older than that, more tired. It was the weary realization that if she didn't stand up now, she might never get her space, or herself, back again. Still standing in the center of her apartment, she took a deep breath. This place, with its 875 square feet and creaky floorboards, was hers. Really hers. And she wasn't ready to give it away in exchange for family approval. Not this time. She walked into her home office, the so-called spare room her mother had casually assigned to Carly, and sat at her desk. She opened her laptop and pulled up her lease agreement, her fingers trembling only slightly. No subletting without approval. No guests longer than 2 weeks without background checks. Good. Good. This wasn't just about refusal, it was about reclaiming. She'd always thought that setting boundaries would mean pushing people away. But for the first time, she wondered if maybe it was the only way to finally be seen. Lena didn't sleep that night, not out of anxiety, but out of clarity. She sat at her desk until nearly 2 a.m., rereading every line of her lease. The rules were clear. The apartment was leased to her and only her. Long-term guests? Only with management approval. Subletting? Strictly prohibited unless formal arrangements were made and reviewed. It was all there. Not as obstacles, but as armor. She reached for her phone and texted someone she trusted. Dan, a colleague from the clinic who had recently mentioned needing temporary housing while his new condo was undergoing mold remediation. He was responsible, quiet, and, most importantly, completely unknown to her family. "Hey Dan," she wrote. "I may have a temporary housing option for you if you're still looking. It's my apartment. While I'll be away for a short work assignment, we draw up something formal. Let me know if you'd like to talk more." He replied within 10 minutes. "Are you serious?" "Yes, I'd be grateful. We can go over everything tomorrow." By sunrise, Lena had a plan. Not a dramatic confrontation. Not another round of arguments that ended in guilt. This time, she'd let reality do the talking. At her lunch break the next day, she visited the building's property office. Tanya, the longtime manager, greeted her with a warm smile. "I have a few questions about temporary occupancy," Lena began, her tone measured. "If someone stays longer than 2 weeks, even if they're a friend or family member, do I need formal approval?" "Absolutely," Tanya replied without hesitation. "They need to be added to the lease for liability reasons. Background checks, emergency contact info, the whole thing." "Why do you ask?" "Just preparing for some travel," Lena said, keeping her tone casual. "I might have someone stay while I'm away." Tanya nodded, handing over the necessary forms and reiterating building policy. "And if anyone shows up claiming to move in without paperwork, security won't let them past the lobby." Perfect. That evening, Lena met with Dan at a quiet cafe, sliding a printout of the sublease agreement across the table. "It's temporary, just 2 weeks while I'm out of town," she explained. "But I need to be clear. My family doesn't know about this arrangement. They think I'll be home, and they've made assumptions I never agreed to." Dan looked up from the document. "You want me to be a wall?" "No," Lena said softly. "I want you to be a door that only opens with respect." Dan nodded, understanding more than words could explain. By Thursday, all arrangements were finalized. She scheduled her remote work to align with the supposed moving weekend, booked a small cabin 2 hours north near McCall, and began packing essentials: important documents, personal heirlooms, and anything she didn't want disturbed. Friday afternoon brought the first text from her mother. "What size bed does Carly need to bring for the guest room? Dad's picking up a new desk for her too. Surprise!" Lena didn't reply. She simply looked around her apartment, her home, and felt something new in her chest. It wasn't fear, it wasn't guilt, it was resolve. They were planning a move she had never agreed to. But this time, when they showed up expecting obedience, they would find the locks had changed, not just on her door, but on her boundaries. Saturday morning arrived like a calm before the storm. Lena sat on the edge of the guest bed. Her guest bed, not the one her mother assumed would be replaced with Carly's furniture. The room was still, filled with the soft light of late September, filtering through gauzy curtains. She took a breath and sent one final text to Dan. "They'll likely arrive around 10:30. Just be yourself. You're not responsible for anything beyond the truth." Dan replied with a thumbs-up emoji and the simple words, "Understood. Good luck out there." By 9 a.m., Lena was already on the road. The air was crisp, the kind that hinted winter wasn't far. She kept the radio low and the GPS voice off. This drive wasn't about distraction. It was about intention. At 10:15 a.m., while sipping coffee from a small roadside diner an hour outside Boise, her phone began lighting up. Her mother. "We're leaving now. Can't wait to get Carly settled. Hope you cleared out the closet like we asked." Her father. "Need the guest parking code ASAP. Don't forget." And finally, Carly. "So excited for a fresh start. I'll take good care of your office." Lena stared at the screen, watching the messages stack like boxes outside a locked door. She didn't respond. Back at the apartment, the security camera Lena had installed just above her entryway activated. She opened the feed from her phone. There they were, her father rolling up with a rental truck, her mother with a clipboard and plastic storage bins, Carly with sunglasses, iced coffee, and an entitled bounce in her step. Then came the knock, firm, repetitive, commanding. Dan opened the door with the easy calm of someone who had nothing to prove. He wore jeans, a simple t-shirt, and held a mug of coffee in one hand. Lena smiled. He looked exactly how she had hoped. Relaxed, grounded, and very clearly not Carly. Even without audio, the scene played like theater. Her father stepped back, visibly thrown. Her mother's eyebrows arched with confusion. Carly's mouth moved quickly, her hands gesturing in disbelief. Dan said something, calmly, probably explained who he was, and that Lena had arranged for him to stay. Her father's jaw tightened. He tried again, perhaps insisting that they had permission. Dan shook his head and handed over paperwork, the signed sublease, building authorization, and a note for security. Moments later, the building's weekend security officer appeared. His presence was the final punctuation mark. Her family retreated, not because they were convinced, but because they were cornered by reality. Lena turned off the feed and took another sip of coffee. By early afternoon, the messages turned from cheerful to frantic. Her father. "What the hell is going on? You gave our apartment to a stranger?" Her mother. "We've raised you better than this. Carly has nowhere to go." Carly, less filtered. "You're unbelievable. You don't deserve that apartment if this is how you treat your family." Lena read the text in silence, not with satisfaction, but with a strange kind of grief. For years, she'd played the role. The peacemaker, the helper, the daughter who never needed anything. And now, in one bold act of quiet resistance, she had shattered that role like glass. She wasn't trying to hurt anyone. She was trying to protect herself. And yet, the guilt lingered like a shadow, whispering old fears. "You're selfish. You're difficult. You've betrayed your family." She closed her eyes and remembered something her grandmother once told her. "People will call you unkind the first time you stop letting them walk all over you. That doesn't mean you're wrong. It means they're surprised." That afternoon, her aunt called. A woman who had never reached out unless drama demanded it. "Sweetheart," the voicemail began, "I'm sure this is just a misunderstanding. Your mom is heartbroken. Carly's in tears. Call me back and let's work this out." Lena didn't respond. Not yet. By evening, the messages slowed. Her father had left one final voicemail. "This stunt of yours has gone far enough. We're not playing games. Call us in the morning and fix this." But Lena knew something had already been fixed. Not for them. For her. She had reclaimed a piece of herself, something more sacred than property. Her right to decide how her life would be lived. Her space, her peace, her voice. As the sun dipped low behind the pine trees outside her rented cabin, Lena stepped outside with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders and a mug of chamomile tea. For the first time in her adult life, the silence around her wasn't heavy. It was honest, and it belonged to her. Sunday morning arrived with a strange kind of stillness. Lena stood by the cabin window, cradling a warm cup of coffee between her palms. Outside, the early fall mist curled low over the treetops, dissolving in soft wisps of sunlight. The world hadn't ended. The earth still turned. But something inside her had shifted, permanently. Her phone was silent now. The deluge of calls, texts, and accusations had slowed to a trickle overnight, like the tide retreating after a storm, leaving behind scattered debris and salt. She felt both lighter and heavier. Lighter because she had finally claimed something for herself. Heavier because doing so had exposed the fragile fault lines in her family. Cracks that had been there all along, only now they were impossible to ignore. The most recent message came from her mother, sometime just before midnight. "We'll talk when you're done making your point. I hope you're happy now that your sister is sleeping on our couch, surrounded by boxes." It wasn't an apology. It wasn't even a question. It was a reminder of the roles they had always expected her to play. The reasonable one, the accommodating one, the woman who never asked for anything. But Lena didn't reply. Instead, she spent the morning hiking a trail just a mile behind the cabin. The leaves were turning, painting the woods in reds and golds. The rhythm of her footsteps on the path calmed her, and with each mile, the tension in her shoulders softened. When she returned to the cabin around noon, she had one new message from her brother, Eric, who had remained silent through all of this. It read, "Hey, I heard everything blew up yesterday. Just wanted to say, good for you. Seriously, I wish I had the guts to do what you did." Lena stared at the screen, stunned by the simplicity and sincerity of his words. It was the first time anyone in her family had acknowledged that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't wrong. She tapped out a quick reply. "Thanks, Eric. That means more than you know." A few hours later, Dan called to check in. "They tried again this morning," he said. "Your dad came by with your mom and asked to speak with the manager. I gave them your written agreement and directed them to the office. Security escorted them out again. Nothing dramatic, just persistent." Lena exhaled slowly. "And you're okay?" "Totally. Honestly, I've dealt with worse during my divorce. But if you ever write a book about family entitlement, I want the first copy." She laughed, really laughed, for the first time in days. "Deal." That night, back at the cabin, she finally allowed herself to cry. Not because she regretted anything, but because doing the right thing shouldn't have to feel this lonely. She cried for the girl she had once been, the one who swallowed her needs to keep everyone comfortable. She cried for the years she'd spent proving her worth through silence and sacrifice. And she cried for the woman she was becoming, someone strong enough to say no, even when love came tangled in guilt. Monday morning, the messages returned. But something had changed. Her father's voice, once hard with command, had softened into negotiation. "We didn't handle this well. Let's meet and talk about what comes next. You've made yourself clear. Now let's figure this out as a family." Her mother followed, less directly. "Carly's looking at apartments today. She's upset, but she'll be fine. I'm just surprised you didn't talk to us first." Even Carly broke the silence later that afternoon. "I don't get why you did it, but I get that you meant it. That's more than I used to give you credit for." Lena read each message slowly, not rushing to answer. The anger had drained from their words. What remained was something unfamiliar, but promising. Accountability. She drafted one response, the only one she would send for now. "I'd be open to a conversation when everyone's ready to talk with respect, not assumptions. Until then, I'm focusing on work and taking care of myself. Please don't contact my building manager again." She hit send and then sat back, watching the message deliver with a quiet sense of finality. It wasn't defiance, it was clarity. She hadn't shut her family out. She'd just shut out the version of them that didn't see her. And in doing so, she was finally being seen. By herself, most of all. The following Saturday, Lena arrived 15 minutes early to the coffee shop she had chosen. Neutral ground, halfway between her apartment and her parents' house. A corner table by the window gave her a view of the parking lot and the door, and most importantly, gave her space. She ordered a cappuccino and sat with her hands wrapped around the cup, going over the mental notes she'd prepared. She wasn't here for apologies. She was here for clarity and a new kind of conversation. Her mother arrived first, always early, always composed, but today something was different. Her usual calm was undercut by rapid blinking and fingers nervously smoothing the edge of her sweater. Lena stood, offered a handshake instead of a hug. Her mother hesitated, then accepted it. Her father and Carly arrived a few minutes later. Her father looked tired, not in body, but in spirit. He didn't charge into the conversation like he used to. Carly looked guarded, lips pressed tightly, her arms crossed over her chest. An awkward silence settled as they all sat. No one reached for a menu. No one made small talk. Finally, her father cleared his throat. "Well, Lena, I think we owe you an explanation." She kept her voice even. "Actually, I think we need to talk about why plans were made for my home without asking me first." Her mother's eyebrows rose slightly. Her father's jaw tensed. Carly avoided eye contact, stirring her untouched coffee. "I understand Carly needed help," Lena continued, "and I've helped this family in more ways than I can count. But deciding for me, assuming I'd go along with it, it wasn't fair. It wasn't respectful." "We didn't mean any harm," her mother said quickly. "We thought you'd be okay with it, like you always are." "That's the problem," Lena said gently but firmly. "You've built a version of me who never says no, but that's not who I am anymore." Her father leaned forward, hands clasped tightly. "Maybe we've leaned too hard on that version of you. We're used to you being the one who holds things together. That's on us." It wasn't an apology, not yet. But it was something. Carly finally looked up. Her voice was quieter than usual. "I honestly didn't know they hadn't talked to you first. I thought you agreed." Lena nodded slowly. "I believe you." A long silence followed, not uncomfortable, but careful, as if everyone was recalibrating in real time. Her mother reached across the table, not to take Lena's hand, but to rest her own palm flat on the table between them, a gesture of offering, not claiming. "We love you," she said. "We just didn't see how far we were crossing a line." "I know," Lena replied. "But going forward, I need boundaries, clear ones. That includes being asked, not informed. It includes the right to say no without guilt." Her father gave a tight nod. "Fair enough." They talked a while longer, about Carly's new apartment search, about the upcoming holidays, about small things. No grand emotional breakthroughs, but honest steps toward change. As Lena left the coffee shop that afternoon, she didn't feel triumphant. She felt stable, seen, not because everything had been fixed, but because finally the foundation was different. This wasn't about winning. It was about rewriting the rules of engagement, with love, but also with limits. 2 weeks after the coffee shop meeting, Lena returned to her apartment. Dan had moved out the night before, leaving everything exactly as it had been, tidy, untouched, respectful. She stepped inside, locking the door behind her, with a quiet sense of closure. For the first time in what felt like months, the apartment truly felt like hers again. Not just legally, but emotionally. Every room whispered of intention. The office, once threatened as a spare bedroom, still held her desk, her pinned-up notes, her late-night scribbles on the whiteboard. The bookshelf remained intact, untouched by someone else's decorations or decisions. She walked from room to room in silence, letting herself settle. She wasn't reclaiming a space. She was reclaiming a life. That weekend, Carly reached out, not through a group text, not through their parents, but directly. "Hey, I'm moving into a place next Friday. It's small, but it's mine. Want to grab lunch after? Just us?" Lena hesitated. Old habits still flinched at Carly's sudden friendliness. But this time, something felt different. There was no pressure, no entitlement, just an invitation. They met at a small cafe downtown. Carly looked different, not in appearance, but in energy. Less defensive, less rehearsed. She talked about her new place, about finally working a steady job at a local art co-op, about trying to take more control of her own life. "I'm not gonna lie," Carly admitted, stirring her tea. "What you did really shook me. Not just because it messed up the plans, but because it made me realize how much I've relied on other people to fix my messes, and how often I just assumed you'd catch me. Lena didn't interrupt. She let the silence settle long enough for Carly to keep going. I thought Mom and Dad always had my back because I was a mess, but maybe they just never expected you to need anything. Lena looked down at her hands. That truth, spoken aloud, hit harder than she expected. I'm trying to be better, Carly said softly. Not just for them, for me, and maybe even for you. Lena nodded, emotions tightening in her chest. That's all I ever wanted. For us to be honest. Not perfect, just real. They left the cafe with no promises, no declarations, just a quiet sense that something had begun to shift between them. Not because Lena gave in, but because she finally stood tall enough to be seen clearly. The holiday season arrived with its usual mixture of warmth and quiet tension. For years, Lena had been the default host, because she had the clean apartment, the organized personality, the flexible schedule. Her refusal last year had caused ripples. This year, she waited to see if those ripples had become tides of change, or just another cycle waiting to repeat itself. A week before Thanksgiving, her mother called. "We're hosting this year," she said carefully. "I was wondering if there's a side dish you'd like to bring." No pressure, no expectation. A question instead of a directive. Lena blinked, surprised by how much that small shift meant. "Sure," she replied. "I'll bring the sweet potato casserole." When she arrived that Thursday afternoon, casserole dish wrapped in a kitchen towel, her father opened the door with a warmth she hadn't felt in years. No commentary on her timing, no lecture on family obligation. Just a simple, "Glad you're here." Inside, the dining room was set with mismatched napkins and more food than anyone could possibly eat. Carly was already there, chatting with Eric and their younger cousins, laughter trailing from the kitchen like music. Lena placed her dish on the counter and took a moment to breathe. The space looked the same, but it didn't feel the same. As they gathered around the table, her father offered a toast, not just of gratitude, but of acknowledgement. "This year," he said, lifting his glass, "I'm thankful for hard conversations, second chances, and learning that the people you love are also the people you need to listen to." A quiet passed over the table, brief but meaningful. Her mother reached for her hand under the table. No squeeze, just contact, gentle and honest. Later, after the meal, Carly found Lena on the back porch, watching the last light of the day fade into evening. "You know," Carly said, pulling her coat tighter, "Mom didn't assign me a room in the house this time. I'm actually staying at a hotel. By choice." Lena raised an eyebrow. "A hotel?" Carly nodded. "Yeah, it's part of this new thing I'm trying, where I don't wait for people to rescue me." They stood there for a while, quiet but comfortable. The evening wasn't perfect. There were still small comments, old habits that tried to peek through. But for the first time in a long while, Lena didn't feel invisible at her own family gathering. She felt whole, not because her family had changed entirely, but because she had. And in that shift, she'd made room for everything else to follow. Lena's story reminds us that love without boundaries isn't love, it's obligation. For years, she gave without question, assuming that quiet sacrifice was the price of family harmony. But over time, those small surrenders of space, voice, and self became a pattern that left her invisible in the life she built. It took one moment of quiet courage to change everything. Not a confrontation, not a loud rebellion, but a clear decision to say, "This is mine, and I matter." Setting boundaries can feel like betrayal, especially when we're raised to believe that love means giving endlessly, but real love honors truth. Real family respects no as much as yes. It's not about shutting people out. It's about showing up fully with self-respect intact, so any connection that remains is rooted in honesty, not expectation. And sometimes, when we finally draw that line in the sand, the people who truly care will learn to meet us on the right side of it. So ask yourself, are you sacrificing peace just to keep the peace? Because there comes a time in life, especially as we grow older, when protecting your inner calm isn't selfish. It's sacred, and it's never too late to reclaim it.